Eaton476 here, bringing you my, I think it's now, sixth video? Yeah, sixth ever video, and this is how to build a space plane. Well, actually a plane. Space plane's next episode, in Kerbal Space Program. So, I'm going to load up a sandbox mode, and we're going to go into the space plane hangar this time, instead of going into the vehicle assembly building. Because we want, when we build our crafts, we want to make sure they are horizontal, not vertical, and end up on the runway and not on the launch pad. Because we don't need to launch a plane, we need to fly one. So there's three different types of cockpits we can start from. We've got the Mark 1, which is your standard cockpit, which is used for most, pretty much, I say most people use this. I don't know how much of a fan I am of this. This is good, I use this for a lot, but I think there's a better cockpit. I'm probably going to use this one today, because it's it's easy to use and it looks pretty awesome. But usually I'd use a different cockpit, and I'll show you that. I'll tell you that why in a second. The cockpit that I usually use is the Mark II cockpit, and that's because, if you can see, it doesn't have a nose cone. It's just got a blank space, and this is because you can put something there now. So this gives you sort of two options. You can put this in the middle of the craft. You can put this at the front. You can just pop like a nose cone on there. You can pop a a docking port on there, and it makes it really helpful. So we're gonna get rid of that, and there's the Mark III cockpit that we can use. Now, the only problem with the Mark III cockpit, because it does look like a bit of a space shuttle, doesn't it? But it does have this front docking port, sorry, front extra sort of port, which you can just use just like the Mark II, which is very helpful. But the back is the problem, because unless you really want to use a Mark III fuselage, which is this one, can you see that the little green ball on the bottom is actually sort of in the middle of the bottom half of that, which means that it works really well with the Mark III. But say if I was to put the Mark II fuselage on there, it just looks ridiculous. So the Mark III isn't a very robust cockpit. It's a bit sort of a one-trick pony. So we're not going to use that, and to be honest, I don't think I'll ever use that. I've never used that in any of my designs, and I probably will never use it. So today we're going to be using the Mark I cockpit, just because we're making a plane. But usually if I was making a space plane, I'd make the Mark II. So we're going to use the Mark I, and there's a few things that we're obviously going to need. We're going to need an engine, we're going to need some fuel, and we're going to need some wheels, some control surfaces, and as well, SAS. That's very helpful. If any design, very, very, very helpful. So we're going to be making a very simple plane today. It's going to be sort of be a bit like a jet fighter. So what we're going to start off with, this jet fuel, because we don't actually need rocket fuel, which we would usually use, because if you can have a look on this fuel tank, the FLT 400, if you look under resources just here, it says liquid fuel 180, and then it says oxidizer. Now the reason you need oxidizer in rocket fuel is because obviously you're in space, and in space there's no oxygen because there's no atmosphere, so you need to get the oxygen from somewhere, and so they put it in a liquid form, in a condensed liquid form, in rocket fuel. Whereas say if I was to get one of the jet engines, so the basic jet engine, if we look at the propellants, we've got liquid fuel, and then we've got intake air, which is different to, say, a rocket, which takes oxidizer. So we're going to need air intakes as well on this, because that's what feeds a jet engine. But that also makes jet engines a lot more efficient than rocket engines, but you'll see why in a second. So if we add some jet fuel, we're going to add 2 of these, but in actual fact I wouldn't usually use these jet fuels because these are very inefficient for the weight. If we look at how much they've got, a total mass of 1.1, and they carry 150 liquid fuel. And then if we look at the Mark II fuselage, that carries 160 fuel, and it's got a total mass of 0.99999. So if I grab a calculator, which I cannot seem to find out one. If we grab a calculator, so say the Mark II fuselage, we do 160 divided by 0.9999 recurring equals, so that's, hang on, wrong thing. Failed maths. I was never a good mathematician. So 0.9999 recurring divided by 160 means that we've got 6.24 times 10 to the minus 3. So that's how much liquid fuel per mass we're getting. Whereas if we do the same for Mark I fuselage, so we would do 1.1 divided by 150. So that's 7.33. So actual fact, yeah, we have less mass per one liquid fuel, whereas this is 7.33 times 10 to the minus 3. Whereas with the Mark II, we actually have, it's actually lighter for each one liquid fuel we have. So theoretically it's better, but just because of this so when you're making large plane designs, that matters. Whereas because this is so small, it's going to be have a high thrust to weight ratio. We don't have to worry about that, and these, you know, Mark 1 fuselages do the trick just fine. So what we're going to now need is an engine, and there's two different engines we can use. We can use the basic jet engine, which is this one, and the basic jet engine provides better thrust at lower altitudes, and as soon as you start going higher, its thrust starts to decrease. So it's good for little, you know, buzzing around planes around the space center or sort of short trips, which is the one we're actually going to be using today, but I'll just show you the other one. And the other one is the turbojet engine. Now this looks a lot bigger than the other than the basic jet engine, and basically this provides lower thrust at lower altitudes, but when you get higher, its thrust increases. So this is really good for suborbital planes and space planes, because they allow you to get the speed to get into orbit or to make cover a lot of distance over Kerbin. But we're not going to be using that today. We're going to be using the basic jet engine, but I will be using the turbojet engine in my next video on how to build a space plane. So now that we've got the engine, the fuel, SAS and the capsule, we're going to start needing some wings. Now these three buttons on here, if you haven't already clicked on them yet, these show you the center of mass, the center of lift and the center of thrust on a plane. So we're going to click all three of those. Now already we can see, I'll tell you which one each one means. So this yellow and black ball is the center of mass. The purple reticule is your center of thrust, and the light blue reticule is your lift. Now obviously, because I haven't got any wings, the lift doesn't really show up on the craft, whereas the engine and the mass does. Now one thing that you've got to make sure of when you're building a plane, if you want it to be stable, is that the center of thrust is directly behind the center of mass, which in this case it is. So that's that, and usually with, you know, as long as you put the engines on the back of the fuel tanks, you should have no problem with that, and make sure they're evenly distributed. If you have two of them, then you should have no problem whatsoever, but you've always got to make sure of that, because otherwise you can start having some unstable planes. So now we're going to add some wings. So we're going to go into aerodynamics and just ignore all these parts that I've got here. That's from the B9 aerospace mod. We're going to have to choose some wings. So there's a few wings we can choose from, and one of which I like using are these swept wings. Now, that I think I like them so much is because they're slightly angled, like towards the back, and that just helps with stability. Now, we're going to have a few of these, so we're going to hold, we're going to highlight over it, we're going to hold the Alt key and click it, and that actually copies the swept wings. So as you can see now, if we have another one here, I'll tell you what, put one. So I'll put one here. Yeah, if we put one here, we can see actually that the center of lift is moving closer towards the center of mass. And actually, where the center of lift is now, that is exactly where you want it to be. It's just behind the center of mass. But in actual fact, I'm going to move these just a bit further forward, because when we are, I'll tell you what, actually, I'm going to muck this up now. Move you further that way, and move you there. Yeah. So we're going to have that like that, because when we add, because we're going to add some control surfaces onto the wings, when we add those, that's going to provide additional lift as well. So the center of lift is going to move back. So, you know, we're going to account for that. So now that we've got the wings on, we are going to add the control surfaces. Now there are two control surfaces we can choose from. There's the standard control surface, which is pretty big. Should those there, and you can see the center of lift has moved back. Or we can use the small control surface, which is this one, which doesn't look as impressive, but the small control surface is actually the better one to choose, because if we look at the its details, it's got a total mass of 0.01 and a lift rating of 0.5, whereas if we look at the standard control surface, it's got an increased mass of 0.04, which is 0.03 extra than what we had before, but only a lift rating of 0.7. So for an extra 0.03 mass, you're only getting 0.2 extra lift. So if we were to have two of the small control surfaces, that gives us a lift rating of 1.0, but only a total mass of 0.02, which is half the mass of a standard control surface, but, you know, a 0.3 extra lift rating. So these small control surfaces are a lot better than the standard control surface. If I just, there we are. So I'm going to put this one on the end, and put this one a bit closer, and they are basically going to aid us in rolling the plane. So now we're going to need a vertical stabilizer on the back of the aircraft. So if I move into aerodynamic, sorry, never mind, yeah, aerodynamic, go to the next page. I'm going to choose this here called the Delta Deluxe Winglet. Now, we're going to choose this because if you have a look at the back, it actually contains a rudder, which is very helpful, because that means it'll help in terms of steering the rocket. So, just trying to think if I've missed anything out. Having a bit of lag at the minute. It's been a real pain in these last few videos though. There we go, it's back to normal now. Okay, so as you can see, the centre of lift is right behind the centre of mass. It's in prime location, and the centre of thrust is directly behind the two. So this is actually working out to be pretty good so far. So what we're going to have is we are going to add some wheels. And we're going to go into utility, go to the next page, and get the small gear bay. I'm actually going to attach these to the, press X to get two of them. I'm going to attach them to the side like this, and then I'm going to hold the shift key and press Q. Press Q a few times, tell you what, do it a bit further up and a bit further apart, until the wheels are vertical like that, because we want to just have extra stability at the back, but we don't have anywhere else where we can put them, so we're going to have to put them on the middle. So they are quite close together, which might be a problem when we're landing, but as we're taking off, it's not a problem whatsoever. And then we're going to have a landing gear on the front, and that should just about do it. In actual fact, I'm going to move that a bit further forward. There we are. So, no, that's still not right. Hang on. There you are, that's perfect. So, as you can actually see, because this wheel's lower than those two, when this is sit on the ground, when this plane sat on the ground, it'll be angled upwards, and that means that when we accelerate down the runway, the air will push against these wings and generate some lift, which is really handy when you're taking off. So that's is a little bit of just an extra help if you're ever adding wheels. Always try and get the front wheels a bit lower than the back wheels. Then you can it makes taking off a lot easier. And then when we also need one extra thing is these GM G50 radial air intakes, because without these the engines would not be able to fire. So if we add those onto the side, that means any air now will now enter these air intakes, go into the fuel engines and oxidize the engine. So now that that's all ready to go, I'm just going to save this as let's go for plane, no, Space Center plane Mark 1. Save that, and we're going to launch it. So now you can see we've ended up on the runway. We always seem to start rolling forwards for some reason, so I'm going to press the brakes just to keep us in place. As you can see now, like I said, we are angled slightly upwards, so as we're going down the runway, the air will push against the bottom of the wings and generate lift. So I'm going to fast forward time, just then it's daytime, so we can actually see what we're doing. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the brakes, and now we need to just do a few things. We're going to press T to activate the SAS, because that's going to help us when taking off. Going to improve stability. I'm going to press the spacebar to activate the engine, and the engine will not activate without air. And as you can see, if we look on these radial air intakes, it's generating 0.46 of intake air, which is here. And as we go faster, the air intake will get bigger as we go, because more air is being forced into the engine faster. So even though it may look low now, it'll increase when we get going. So now that that's ready to go, we are going to hold the left shift key to activate the engine, and away we go. So it's the WAS and D keys to turn left, right, and up or down, and then you're going to use the Q and E keys to roll as well. And as you can see, without even having to pull up, we can take off on the runway, due just to the natural lift of these wings. Now, because this plane is so light, we've already accelerated to nearly 200 meters per second, which is, you know, absolutely fantastic. So this thing is just like a little jet fighter. It really responds well to you know, movements. So if we pull up quickly, I'm going to do a flyby on the Space Center. We need highway to the danger zone on at this point. Alright, nearly there. Okay. There we are. Oh, shit. Come on, pull up, pull up, pull up. There we are. For some reason this is being really laggy. I'm not sure why. Anyway, so yes, what we're going to do now is we are going to head towards this island over here. And that's because, I don't know, you might not be able to see it on your screen, but there's just a tiny little green patch there that's a different colour than the rest, and that is actually a runway. And the people at Squad put that there to basically, so then people can test their plane designs just without having a full-fledged mission, because you can take off, you can have a sustained flight across open water and then land at a completely different section, then you can take off and try to land back at the Kerbal Space Center. So if we maintain this heading, one problem actually I've already identified with this plane is that it pitches down, and that is because we've got these two radial air intakes on the top, and that's because it's making this thing top heavy, so it's pointing down naturally, which is a bit of a pain, but it's not too bad. You know, this plane isn't perfect, it's just a little fun plane to mess about with. It's so easy to move about. Look and see into the cockpit. Make us dizzy. So as you can see, actually the air intake is actually increased now to 1.0 now that we've actually started speeding up, because more air is being forced into the engine. And when you're making space planes, you need to have as much air intake as you can get, because obviously the higher up you go, the less air gets in, so you need the more air as possible getting into the engines, because otherwise they'll flame out. And then if you've got two especially, they don't flame out at the same time, so you can start flat spinning, and it just becomes an absolute nightmare. So now that we're getting towards the runway, we want to start decreasing thrust to slow ourselves down, because we are going at over 220 meters per second. We were going then. With these little designs, they go really quickly. So we are going to press G to retract extend the landing gear, and this actually creates drag. So you'll actually, if I get rid of the thrust, it really starts slowing down. Not just because we don't have any thrust now, but these landing legs really do slow us down. So you want to make sure you get rid of these as soon as you start flying, because they can be, they can slow you down quite considerably. So while we are heading, we're going to do a 25% thrust. Just then we've got, just some power to be able to maneuver while we make our way towards the runway. Yeah, this bit isn't very interesting, I'm afraid. Okay, so as we get closer, I'm actually, because we can see that we're using A and D, the rudder on the back of the tail is moving to help control the ship, so the plane. So as we get closer, I'm going to press the X key just to cut all thrust, and we start slowing ourselves down quite rapidly. Now, obviously, you want to, when you're landing, you don't want to land too hard, but you don't want to also wait forever. So a good stern landing is always good, and always try to pitch up just before you drop, just to level yourself out. There we are. Right, so we've landed. I'm going to press the brakes just to slow us down, and hopefully I won't fall off the end of the runway, as I've done on many occasions. So there we are. We've successfully landed on the, I don't know what you call this, whether it's like the Kerbal Space Center landing strip, I don't know. Oh, sugar. Brake, 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 brake. Oh no, it's going off. Never mind. As you can see, just by taking off on such a short little bit of runway, this plane has got such, thrust to weight ratio. It's incredible. So I'm going to see if it'll pull up. Pull up, pull up, pull up. Oh yes, beautiful. Right, I'm just going to do a quick flyby, and then, actually, tell you what, I'll head straight back to the Space Center. I'll stop recording now, and I will join you back on the approach to the space center. We're now on the approach. And I've cut the thrust down because we're quite high and we're at good speed, so we're fine to cut the thrust at this point. I'm going to extend the landing leg, well, the wheels, and slowly make our descent. It's generally a lot easier to land at the Kerbal Space Center because it's got such a long, straight runway. It's pretty difficult to get it wrong. I'm saying that now, and I'm going to regret it because I'm probably going to crash this on the way down. I did when I tried. I've recorded this a couple of times, and I've had some frame rate issues, so I had to basically refilm them, and both times I fell off the runway, and crashed on one of them. So hopefully this won't do the same. We're slowly making our way down. Just getting us, not touching down just yet, because I want to get a bit further forward. There we are. Perfect landing. Slow us down. Oh, slow. Oh, let's just turn us around. And there we are. We've landed successfully back at the Kerbal Space Center. So that's been it, guys, for my 6th video. Please like and subscribe to the video, to my channel if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.